All right, everybody, good to go. Zach, actually, we should bring Zach Fogg up here. Actually, there's so many people that we should bring up. That's what, just like Jehan said, it was an amazing, amazing community. This is building on Handshake panel, and we have two amazing builders for sure with us. We have Matt Zipkin, lead developer at Impervious, and he's been involved since inception, right? And Handshake?
Since before inception, actually, and Anthony as well. There's a small crew of us that were working on Handshake during testnet. I kind of came on board during testnet 4. That's how many testnets there were, at least. Anthony probably predates that by quite a bit.
Yeah, you just reminded me that there's so many different testnets. I forgot about that, actually.
Right, and after testnet 4, we were going to do another testnet because consensus rules changed, and we ended up doing a SIMnet, and the parameters were really weird. And
wow, mad throwback. Wow.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So much has
awesome.
changed.
Yeah, so that's great, Matt. And then, Anthony Luce, CTO and co-founder at Namebase.io. So great to have you.
Yeah, great being here.
All right. So I want to get questions from the audience. I'm trying to monitor the chats as well. I think this is a very, very important panel. I know there's been lots of questions throughout the conference about, various questions of how to build security. I know is a big question. I think both of you are very well prepared to share about all these different topics. I have some questions as well. But maybe first, I think you kind of hinted towards it, Matt, but how did you first hear about Handshake? I think maybe you spoke about it briefly in your previous panel yesterday, but if you could share again a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I did mention it briefly a little bit yesterday. I joined First.io in 2018 to work on a project called Bcoin, which is a Bitcoin full node implementation written in JavaScript by JJ, who worked at First, still works at First. And basically he built Bcoin for Purse. They wanted their own full node implementation. There's controversy over alternative implementations of full nodes, especially in Bitcoin. But it's inevitably going to happen. It's like chess. Like somebody is going to write chess in every computer programming language. It's just going to happen. So people are writing Bitcoin full nodes in other languages too, like Go.
Okay.
And
maybe move closer to your mic too. There's some.
Oh, sure. I can turn this a bit too. Is that better?
Yeah, it's a lot better where you just were.
Here, let me move this around a little bit too. So I joined.
Yeah,
we're good now? Okay, I'm rocking it. Do I sound like I'm on the radio? Okay.
It's great, man.
So I was hired by Purse to work on Bcoin. I actually kind of entered the Bitcoin development space as an artist. I made the Bitcoin block clock. I'll show you guys a little bit later, the one I've got on my wall. And I made a smaller one that was just an SPV node. And at the time, the only SPV node that I could find that I could run in a terminal that wasn't just like an iPhone app was Bcoin. And so I made a small version of the Bitcoin block clock that ran Bcoin in SPV mode, and Andrew Lee from Purse.io bought it. So I went down to the office and met them, and then maybe 8 months later, and I guess I should preface this by saying I was an audio engineer for 15 years. It's funny you made a comment about my microphone, because that used to be literally the only thing I thought about. So I had this whole other career, and Andrew and JJ wanted me to come help with Bcoin. They had some funding and they wanted help with documentation, and they hired me as a developer advocate to basically do Bcoin art and write guides and help get developers involved and make cool things with Bcoin. And the whole open source team at Purse was very, it was open. We were paid by Purse, but basically had no obligation to the profit model of the company, which is a super interesting way to contribute to open source development, and lots of people use Bcoin besides Purse. So we were really contributing to the community, and we would joke that our jobs were number go up engineers. Our job was to make Bitcoin useful and valuable. And the way that we were hired to do that was to work on this JavaScript library. And also how I mentioned yesterday, when I remember the shirt I was wearing the day I was interviewed by Andrew and JJ, and they were also like, they're both smoking, both got their vaporizers, and they're like, we're doing this DNS blockchain thing. And like I said, I was like, okay, Bitcoin's really the thing that I'm obsessed with. And, altcoins, I don't really, didn't really care so much about it. It didn't feel strongly one way or another. Just, I'm like, okay, you guys are doing an altcoin. Okay. But I guess I'll learn about DNS. And so I came on as part-time. I was I was still working at the recording studio, but I had a lot of downtime, and I was contributing to Bitcoin on the computers at work without telling anybody for months between booked sessions, contributing to Bitcoin. And finally, the day came when I got a full-time offer from Purse. And by that time, I was sick of the audio industry, the part of it that I was in, I should say. So came on Bitcoin full time and worked all the way through, Purse kind of like closed and they didn't. And some people left the company, and the open source team, a few of us were let go and tried to find other jobs. And that was right after Handshake mainnet launched. And also, like I was saying yesterday, it was super interesting how many more users there were for Handshake. And like Bitcoin has a couple of users, and maybe there's 50 Bitcoin nodes out there. Some people are integrating it into projects, and issues would come in from users, but mainly we were just like building our own, scratching our own itches and trying to make it cool and try to find other users for it. And then Handshake launches, and all of a sudden there's 100 people that want to know like how the RPC commands work and like what's wrong with the documentation. And by working on Bitcoin, we all knew about it already. Javed, Nodar, myself, Mark Tyneway, Boima was like full-time on Handshake. Mark kind of did both, but also focused on Handshake a lot. And that was really exciting to just have like all these users on this project that I knew about. And I have this problem where if somebody asks me a question I know the answer to, I can't resist. Like even if it pops up on my phone and it's like not a good time to be on my phone, I'm like, God, I know the answer to that question. I really can't wait to tell that person, what it is they're asking. And so
you're like that. Yeah.
It's true. And like,
I see you in the groups and Telegram, you're like on it, man. You're just on it. You're just like,
yeah.
So helpful.
It's an obsession. Yeah. And like, I'm still on the Bitcoin Slack. I'm like all alone. Braden's gone and Java and Nodar, like they're still connected, but I don't ever see them online. So I'm doing all the support for Bitcoin too. Like I've just sort of added Handshake to that. What else? Yeah. So when Handshake mainnet launched, that there was this new thing that was very exciting that I already knew a lot about. And, I struggled to get a foothold, in development. And, I sort of worked for Kyokin, but through Purse for a little bit and on Bob Wallet. And then I sort of worked for private internet access for a little bit. And then, over the summer, I was just freelance and raised money, from donations. Namebase was very generous to support me. And I got some other generous donations from some early adopters of the system. And then I left and I worked for BitGo for 3 months. And then Mike Carson started Impervious, and that, here we are.
Great. Thanks for that background.
Sure.
I'm rolling on my tongue too much. I feel like it's story time. It's story time here. I'm just fascinated. This is great. Thanks, Matt. And then Anthony, I think a lot of us know Taishan, your partner and CEO. Mm-hmm. I'm really happy to have you sharing with us. I'd love to hear your story and getting into Handshake and Namebase. Briefly, I know that could be a whole whole session, but just a little brief intro.
Yeah, sure. So online class I was taking in around like 2012, and the project was build a decentralized like crowdfunding website that accepts Bitcoin as payments. So that was like the class project. And then I did that and I thought, this is right about this exact same experience I could have had just paying with the credit card. And to my mind, it wasn't like flashy. It wasn't like it was changing the user experience. And I wasn't interested at that point. I wish I had stayed interested. I didn't really get it at that point. And I took another look at sort of the space in like 2016, now like learning more about all these like new projects that were happening. And then I got a lot more interested, but I still didn't really quite get it. And the framework I was using at that time was what totally new experiences can we create? And I always had in the back of my mind, like trust as a given. So I was, to give some examples, like augmented reality, that's obviously like a drastically new experience you can't really get until that technology starts working. But for a lot of what people are using crypto for, it's really like doing the same sorts of experiences in environments where those weren't possible for the reason of trust. And that was that critical piece that I was missing. And that's sort of one reason it's interesting. Obviously, there's far more than that, like thinking about like incentive design and like programming people and like all these things that come after. But I didn't really get it at that point either. And I don't think I really started to understand those things till like 2018, like early 2018, when I took yet another look. And then, I was in SF with Tishan. We're, very like open-minded, like meeting all these people and like networking. And at some point, we met the first team and just started talking about things. And we hear about Handshake, and it didn't take much to like become interested. I think the core piece of Handshake at that time that I was very, very interested in was Handshake's ability to get rid of certificate authorities, because it's just such a simple story for how to totally get rid of these CAs. And it was just such a clear picture in my mind of like, wow, this is just a much better way of doing things. I guess some additional background. I've always been interested in security, and that's like pretty much why I started programming. I just wanted to learn how to be a hacker. So when I initially started, that was all I did. So security has always been very important to me, and just having such like a clear picture of how we can get rid of CAs is awesome. And then Namebase, I think, is a relatively natural idea once you hear about Handshake. Like somehow it's got to be easy for normal people to use. So we focus on that and do that.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you for that. It's great. Like some people in chat are saying, this is a great session. We should make this an NFT. Some people you guys are really building in the community for everyone. So yeah, I think building on Handshake is extremely important, right? A lot of people are, investing. We had a session about investing. We had a session, about buying and selling names. But a lot of people have been saying, if we don't build on the system, we don't actually create products and content that makes people want to access these names, there's no point. I mean, Drew Rosner was saying that in his session, like, if we don't get browser adoption, but we have to build the whole community, whether you're a builder or not. If you're not, maybe contribute HNS fund or other ways, even gifting names to get more adoption. So what are some easy steps? I mean, I think, especially Namebase, you've made it super easy for everybody to get onboarded with also some complementary products. So like maybe Anthony, you could share some ideas you have for people. Maybe they're not so technical. I think even the smallest contribution of making would be helpful, right? I know you guys have that KPI.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned something in that question, was maybe for people that are not too technical, because I think that's an important point, which is that there's a very broad spectrum of what you can build on Handshake, and it ranges from just putting up a simple, like D-Links site, or maybe you level up from that and you make your own static site using HTML when you host that somewhere, or maybe you level up and maybe there's an actual server now at your Handshake name that's not normally accessible in the open web. So there's like a gradient here that you can sort of pick where you are. And I think it's important for people to build at each of those levels. So starting out, I think what I would personally love to see, and I am seeing some of this, but would love to see more of, is just seeing those interesting, like cyberpunky, like 90s style, like personal websites, just on all these Handshake names that ideally all look like very different, like very unique, like has lots of character. And then, so we recently launched news.namebase.io, a name news, and there's a little tab there you can go to showcase Handshake projects. And I'm hoping that that's sort of a way that people can start sharing these like sites that they're making, just so the whole community can sort of supercharge and get all these sites to be like used and viewed, because developers love when their things get used, and that's a critical part of it. Awesome. So I would encourage like every developer that knows HTML, like, hey, if you like Handshake, then make your own personal site that's somewhat custom to you and put it up there, because seeing that diversity really like paints the picture of like, wow, like there's lots of like different people using this.
Agreed.
I'll pause there. I have lots more thoughts, but in case
this is
you
great.
want to mention anything.
Yeah, I guess maybe pass the question to Matt. What would you like? You're in all these groups and Telegrams and Reddits. What do you see as you would like more people to be building or creating, or what are some ideas?
There's it's just a big open canvas. Like for me, there's a spectrum, like Anthony mentioned, there's people who like all they really want to do is interact with Namebase and buy and sell names. I am or I mean, that's not just what he was saying, but like, I'm trying to say that like, there's very simple ways you can participate, and there's obviously very deep ways you can participate. There's like, I was thinking maybe after this convention, we just have a quick little handshake ninjas group, and like, you know, whoever has got like an HTTPS site on Handshake, like gets into that group. Like that's the ultimate. That's the ultimate Handshake build, is like secure content hosted on Handshake. Like Library Genesis is just like my favorite use case, and it's just kind of a recent development. Like there it is. It's a secure website owned entirely by that website's administrator, and they have trouble with domain censorship. It's like, yes, like that's, you know, that's so cool. I love D-links. I love anybody getting anything on a site. I remember the first time I sent and received a Bitcoin transaction. I remember withdrawing my first coins from Mt. Gox and like seeing it and sending. I can't remember who the actual first person I sent Bitcoin to. It might have been a friend, or I might have bought something. But like when you see it work for the first time, and you see it confirmed in a block, and it's just like, wow. And like for Handshake, going to http:// handshake emoji or whatever, or, you know, for me it was rough. The first site. The first hosted content on a Handshake name. And so when you see that, that's so cool. So I would also encourage people who are getting started or something, or learning about it, or they have some coins, or they have some names they aren't really sure to do. Like also try to be an audience member and experience this web. See if you can get your browser to go to one of these sites. And there's a lot of ways to do it. There's extensions, and, you know, anywhere from like a browser extension to using Namebase's resolver, or using an easy Handshakes DOH resolver, or using a Puma app, or HNS.2. Well, like all these things are great. Like HNS.2 is great too, but the joy of seeing something totally unusual in the browser, like I encourage people to seek that out, even though it takes a few extra steps, you know? And so go ahead and get started on Namebase, make an account, get some coins, do some names, sell a name, make some money, be like, whoa, this is cool. What else can I do? You're looking for something to do next, like get it to work, you know, get it to work in your browser. And then you're like, oh man, this is HTTPS proof of concept. Like that's a cool URL. I want a URL like that. How do I get there? And then there's all kinds of ways, you know, there's D-links, or you can, Sebastian Razor has published a guide using OpenBSD. I followed the whole thing step by step, and I got it to work. That site for me is Omnitude, which is a name I got from Namebase. And he tells you how to run a web server and a name server and get it all to work. I have the handout package, which you can install on a VPS, and it generates all the DNS set keys and the SSL key, and it gives you a very simple thing. You just paste into Bob or Namebase, and you can host a secure site that way.
Great. Yeah, so I don't know. I know it's a rabbit hole, and I'm not so good at. I know, Matt, you're always trying to make everything secure, and it's really good. I don't know if we want to get so deep into HTTPS. Let's Dane. I mean, I'm still honestly, that's why I started my like blog and videos. I'm trying to make it more simple, because some of these guides, like I saw Razor's guide, it was too technical for. I mean, I'm still like it's still hard for me to follow some of these technical guides. So how far are we where it could be something like, you know, I like Let's Encrypt, right? Like I just get free SSL, I press a button, it like looks like it's doing something, and it's just successful. You know, like we're pretty far from that. I mean, right now, I was lucky to have some people helping me. Also, I want to make sure that the community is so helpful. Like I think you're literally replying to a question on a group right now in this session.
No, I'm not. Hands up.
No, I mean it's great. I mean, if you are or you aren't, but I mean, first of all, I want to encourage people. Some people I talk to are shy to ask questions in groups. You know, I have friends. They're a little bit like, oh, I don't want to bother other people. It's a question somebody already asked or already knows, or I don't know enough. I think what I've noticed in this community is I just throw a question in a group, or Namebase's Discord is really great. You know, there's various Telegram groups and others. I think that the developers here are all really willing to help you, right? Like I'm kind of like that middle tech, and I'm half tech, half business, kind of, maybe bad at both. But you know, I just jump in a group, and there's so much support and question, right? So we should really engage with the community, right? I mean, would you say people shouldn't be shy to ask questions, right?
Sure.
Oh yeah, not at all. Yeah. If you're wondering something, there's always 10 lurkers also wondering that. So, like,
and that's
really important.
I was just going to say there's also, or maybe something that we need to develop more of is like knowledge bases or like FAQ. I refer people to learn.namebase.io all the time. It's pinned in the subreddit, which I also like, whenever somebody makes a cool guide, I'm like, hey, I got email working on Handshake. I'm like, write a guide, post it on Reddit, post it on Medium, tell everybody, I'll give you 100 HNS, I'm constantly doing that. I'm trying to get everybody to, hey, how do I do this? I don't know. Figure it out. Once you figure it out, tell everybody and put it on the subreddit or put the Medium post and give me the link to the Medium post or something. So, chat rooms are great places to ask for help. I spend a lot of time on IRC, and if you can get yourself on IRC, it's something that's slightly more technical than like Telegram or Slack, but I get questions answered there all the time. I have a problem installing something on OpenBSD, this weird flavor of Linux I've never used before. Went to the IRC channel and got help from people who are like obsessed with that flavor of Linux right away. The DNS channel on IRC has been very helpful. I don't think they know what I'm actually up to, but they have answered a lot of my questions about DNSSEC. And Bitcoin and Handshake channels are like that too. Like the Bitcoin core developers are surprisingly happy and available to answer questions on IRC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Anthony, what were you saying? Did you want to add something to the questions or the community part, developers?
No, I think Matt summed it up good. I do have lots of random ideas I could share with people, things to build.
Yeah, please. There's also some questions in the chat I'll get to too. We have about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, sure. So something I'm really, really interested in seeing is some sort of, it's hard to put a finger on it, but some way to, sign random content with names that are pinned to your Handshake name for the following purpose. Let's say it's like Twitter that you're making. You're making decentralized Twitter. I want to be able to like sign messages or encrypt messages with my friend's keys and send it through this, centralized website just so it's accessible on the normal internet, and have them be able to decrypt that using their keys that they just have. And I did that by looking up their Handshake name. So basically making just like PGP keys like more universal and just having more trust in that, this key is actually for this person. And I know that because I know this person's name, and that's the name they're communicating to me with. So where I see this getting very interesting is if you imagine a news website. So suppose that there's all these articles, and maybe it's about protests in Myanmar, and perhaps there's like friends that you have that are first parties to that article that was written, and they can sign this with that key that's pinned to their name, and you can decide to trust those keys and trust those friends. Like PGP and like the Web of Trust, like already sort of like has that sort of idea. Because the goal that I would like to get to is for me to trust news that has been signed by lots of first parties that I trust somehow. And maybe that's because it's a friend of a friend, and both of those connections are strong. Like I trust their key and they trust the friend's key, and that friend was the first party to the content in the news article. Because when I think about for this particular problem of like how fake news is going to proliferate and change, it's only going to get worse. Like we already have like GPT-3, like that stuff gets like very scary when you just try and project it a few years out. So I see like this fake news problem getting worse and worse, and I don't see any path for a centralized solution. When I say centralized solution there, I mean like suddenly just deciding to trust this provider of news, like this mainstream like media outlet. I think like a nicer solution that is like the essential solution is there's like this network of people you trust, and you trust the things they trust. And that's possible by pinning keys to Handshake names. It's something I'm very interested in seeing get built.
Yeah, so there's also the Namer News also has the login with Handshake name. So actually I also set up a handshake.mercenary forum, and I'm talking to Jehan. I'd love to integrate your that's kind of part of the Namer News, right? Is your ID login with your Handshake name for other developers. Mm-hmm. So that's something really, really exciting for sure.
Mm-hmm. Just briefly on that, on logging in with a Handshake name, and I'll speak like technically, I think this is call focused on people building on Handshake. We're going to release way more docs on that stuff soon. And there's a GitHub issue about this somewhat recently that I left a comment on, but just to share here as well. So the goal for Handshake login is when you're logging into a website and you say, hey, my name is Anthony, what that authentication server is doing is it's asking the Anthony name, like, hey, how am I supposed to log you in? So it then redirects you to that sort of website. And the typical way is there's some keys that are saved and, that are encrypted and stored in, your browser. But there's a number of things you could do there. Like it could redirect you to a website that asks your fingerprint, like something like WebAuthn. It could redirect you to a website that asks you to copy and paste a challenge that you've signed on with your PGP key that's on a totally separate laptop. Or maybe it's an app on your phone, or maybe it's a multi-sig with 5 different things. So all of this is like possible. It's just not built yet. Anyone can do it, and it's something we'll help out with a bit. But it's possible for people to do that today already if they're interested.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really exciting stuff. There's a bunch of questions in the chat and in the question section. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them. You guys both are welcome to see the questions tab. Actually, it's true. The link for Sebastian Razor's guide, do you have that offhand?
Sure.
We could find it, but maybe later we'll put it in a chat.
There's a link on HTTP Omnitude. I linked to it from there. If you have Handshake, you can get to it from there. But it's sebastian.razor/handshake tutorial.html. I'll copy it.
I'll look at another question. Somebody's just worried about storing their HNS there. I don't know if you want to give some insights about security and everything.
So I'm looking at the question. Are you referring to one? It seems to be asking about Namebase security specifically.
Yeah, he's asking specifically about that.
Yeah, sure. So I can say a bit about it. So, some of our funds are stored in hot wallets because it's very necessary to be able to bid with those. Some of those funds are stored in, most of those funds are in like a cold wallet where it's like, it's never connected to the internet. The keys are not never exposed to a, computer that's been connected to the internet or, different various kinds of hardware devices, etc. There's never been a breach of the wallet, although there was one incident very, very start in February where some of our users' passwords were just on the open internet and someone guessed that and then that user, lost their funds. So that's not necessarily a problem it's not necessarily a technical security issue on Namebase's end, but we should have done more to prevent that. And now we do, because now we have to whitelist IP addresses before they can log into your account. But there's never been any security issue, there's never been any sort of breach, any loss of funds, loss of names, improper access to account, when, the password wasn't just on the internet. So we've gone through pen testing by this company called Synac. At the time, they typically worked with larger companies, but because of some networking, some connections that we had, they're willing to test our site. And then they had I forget the exact numbers, but it's over 100 plus. It works similar to some of these crowdsourced bug bounty websites, but it's a little bit different because they all have to go through some assessment and they're all whitelisted. So all these pen testers are known to be good. I used to do some stuff for Synac before. Okay. So there's 100 plus researchers spending so many hours trying to hack our site, and then they found a few things that were honestly very minor, nothing that would have had any problems. And the time to vulnerability, they showed us the histogram was far in the tail compared to the average website. So things are very safe. Part of the reason we build things at the speed we do is because we spend a lot of time double checking to make sure that things are safe. And that's the engineering culture that we have in the company. It's to give some examples, we made some changes to how we send transactions recently. So if anyone that's watching the blockchain closely, you'll see that a lot of the bids, a lot of the reveals are now batched into a single transaction. It's far more efficient, both in terms of the speed that the wallet can do that, and also in terms of reducing the size on the blockchain. Far more efficient. That code was ready for probably over a month. And it was just spent so long just checking every tiny way that could have gone wrong before we were willing to, start rolling that out. So we take that very seriously, and there has not been a problem.
Great. Okay. Thanks for that answer, Anthony. I know I know you guys are doing great at Namebase, and it's a big responsibility because I think the huge volume. I know Tieshan's talked about you guys have been scaling really fast as Handshake has grown, Namebase grows. So you guys are doing a great job for the community. There's a longer question. I don't know if you see that here. I don't know if we have time, but I see a longer question. He has, and.bar, and he wants to create subdomains that resolve on traditional DNS like Mike's Restaurant.and.bar, and then point them to Handshake Network. So I think the tricky part is also, I think, right? You got to choose HNS or DNS. Also, I think it's both at the same time. I don't know. It's a little bit hard for me to understand fully. It's a bit tech. Do you guys understand that?
You can host a website on multiple domains. You can run one instance of Apache on an IP address on a server, and then configure it to respond even with different SSL certificates to different domain names. So you could have you could be running a web server at namebase.io, and it could also operate the exact same content at Namebase or www.namebase or something like that. That might help answer that question.
I think that's what it means.
There's also a lot of interesting flexibility because you can have multiple DNS records in any root zone or in your zone file, and one kind of advanced DNS technique that big companies use is something called eDNS, which adds extra data, including your location. And you can serve different DNS records to a user based on where they are on Earth. So that, when you're going to facebook.com, they don't just have that one instance running on a web server on AWS or something. They have them all over the world. And when you type in that URL, the IP address you get back from the DNS system is the one that's closest to your literal location, or where it thinks your literal location is. So it can be very flexible. You can have, we were having a conversation the other day about somebody was interested in the Ethereum name server idea that we were working on, and asked, can I transition or can I do both? And yeah, of course, if you have a Handshake name, you can have two NS records, and one points to the Ethereum bridge and one points to a regular name server. And you're going to want to keep those zones in sync. Otherwise, different users might end up with different records.
Yeah. So I'm just afraid about time. I really appreciate it. He's asking for a guide. I mean,
okay.
What I think, though, Brandon Dees, I mentioned in the intro, he's in our chat. He's also super supportive and active in the developer community all over every channel I know of that I'm in. And he says that there's more coming in for HNS Fund. We're doing an auction today. A lot of proceeds will go to HNS Fund. Once there's more money going to these open source developers, a lot of people are working for free, or in hopes that later their product or project or knowledge or network is monetized. So hopefully that some of those funds will go to those people that will create this documentation. But it's one of the challenges, I think, of being in an open source kind of community and a decentralized kind of system is it's almost chicken or the egg. Do I quit my day job and build something all day, hope later I get, but we see Jehan is interested in investing in startups in the ecosystem. There's a HNS Fund coming up, getting more funding. So hopefully more documentation will come.
One thing I'll quickly say about that is we're still very early, and we can talk about how early it is. There's only 100 people watching this. That might be the entire ecosystem, or at least the English speaking one. It's still a very early time. And there are already a certain number of developers that are doing amazing things, like the guy who wrote ShakeDex, or the developer who wrote ShakeDex. I don't know who they are. Or the developer who wrote the pre-signed reveal PR for HSD, or Sebastian, who's doing this email thing. And I'm just over the last 2 months, maybe, the level of projects that are being born on Handshake are just crazy. And as Handshake is getting exciting and as more money is coming into the space, there's already 10 developers at the top of my list that if someone was we're going to give Impervious money and you can hire somebody, I know who those people are right away because they're already building awesome stuff.
Okay. And there's some great conversations in the live chat, and there's more and more questions coming, but I think we're already over time. It's great though. But I agree with what Matt's saying is I've only been in this 4 or 5 months. I think October I got involved 2020. And even since then, I've seen huge growth in the community and the users and the development. And it seems like this is a new milestone, this conference, the HNS Fund, various DWeb Foundation starting, also all the products coming out of Namebase with the news, Namer News, and login with Handshake and the HDNS.io. So I feel like there's amazing things. I think people can read the chats themselves. I don't think we'll be able to get to more questions, but Anthony, do you have any final words for people in the audience, interested in building? I know that, some support, motivation for them.
Yeah. So highly encourage people to do it's pretty easy to put a website on Handshake, like a static page. And I highly encourage people to get their foot in the door by just putting like something up. And maybe that's to start as just a D-Link. And then you realize, I actually want this to be far more custom. I need to put up my own static page here. And then you level up and do that. And then like as you get more and more into things and as you learn more and more, you're going to, have all these sorts of ideas of other things you could be doing. So I encourage people, if they're feeling any hesitance around, any hesitation around, there's a lot here. Maybe I don't fully understand what Handshake is yet, or it's just like a lot to learn. I encourage you to just take that first baby step and just put something on there. Maybe it's just changing your resolver settings and accessing some names and feeling the FOMO of like, hey, I want my name to work like that too. And then once you get in, you can learn slowly and start doing more and more complicated things as you get more involved.
And I think the last part, there's people talking about marketing, browser adoption. If we're just buying and sitting on names, we're not going to get browser adoption. If we're building and we're showing all these sites being built and showing all these products being built, that's the way to get browser adoption. So of course we all like to speculate on names and flip, etc. I know some developers are actually funding their development by flipping names. I won't say specifically who, but there are some I've talked to about how they're funding what they do, and they're actually flipping, buying and selling names, really cool. And they're using that to build, which is pretty amazing. So
yeah, it's awesome.
I think we're at time. I'm trying to keep on top of everything, but this has been fascinating. And I think the main takeaway is, just put anything. Like D-Links is super simple if you're using Namebase for your names. Just getting that on there, it's going to be another stat in our KPI of active websites. But of course, try to keep pushing yourself. Like me, I'm not technical. In the last few months, I've been in these huge conversations about scary code and command line stuff, and you just keep going down that rabbit hole. So thank you, Matt and Anthony. It's really a pleasure to be able to host this panel with you. You're really building and helping us so much here. Thank you.
Thanks for everything. Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, see you.
All right.